Hey there. So, last 2 weeks ago, I was talking about academics, and I thought that this week I could talk about the online semester and especially three things that I believe are really important and useful when you're studying. So, without further ado, I'll begin. The first thing is do what you can, and that translates to using your time properly. That means, for example, using techniques such as the Pomodoro technique or managing your time with a calendar or using agenda or just checking your subjects in university or school and then finding a way to just have enough time for everything. Here in Germany, for example, the way that the university suggests that you organize your time is that you have, for example, 2 hours for the class, plus 2 hours to prepare for the class, plus 2 hours to work with your notes or with whatever content you learned after the class. So you should basically multiply every unit of time by three. And that way you will have more or less of an average of how much time you actually invest in a subject. So that's one way of seeing it. The other thing that you should do is to do what you can with your resources. So, for example, in my case, I have a graphic tablet and I have paper and decent internet connection. So, I am able to study online and to get a lot of information from the internet. But for example, if I had limited access to the internet, something that I would do is to download as much as I can and work with files that are not so heavy or complicated to process for my computer. So, depending on your computer or your electronic devices, or for example, if you're not using electronic devices, whichever paper or books that you can find, just use whatever resources you have that make it easier for you to process information in the way that you like it. And also, the important thing number three from this part, which is do what you can with your goals. So, what do I mean by this? What I mean is that, for example, if your goal is to just pass a subject because you want to spend your time doing other things, then you should always keep that in mind and remember that to get that goal, you're going to have to invest a particular amount of time and resources. But if your aim is to get 100%, then maybe you're going to have to do more effort to get there. And when you understand that point, then you will be planning in a more serious way because you will know, okay, if I want to get 100% in this subject, then I have to start maybe before the semester starts, so that way I am more prepared and ahead of whatever comes to me. But if even if you start the semester, like in my case, in a rocky place and you are catching up in between, you still have the capacity to perform really well if you think about these three things, which are, again, time, resources, and goals. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is to let things go. And what exactly do I mean by that? I mean that sometimes we get really attached to certain things, such as the things that I will mention. And this attachment doesn't really allow us to move forward nor to feel comfortable with the current situation. So, what I mean with this is that these are three particular things that usually make us feel uncomfortable and we don't get any progress just by holding on to these things. All right, so if this applies to you, then I would suggest that you first foremost let go of the results. And by that, I mean that, for example, if you write an exam and then you realize that you didn't perform as good as you thought, well, it's just a exam. It's just a piece of paper or a piece of digital paper which tells you the performance that you had in a particular amount of time, but it's not going to define your life. Sure, grades do affect us over time, but in the end, it's not about what happens in that particular exam, but what you do afterwards or in the present moment that matters. So don't be too hard on yourself and try to see these things as just reflections of how you were in that particular time, but not who can you be in the future. The second thing is to totally let go of expectations. And I know this sounds easier than to apply it, but one thing that we really struggle as humans is to meet the expectations that we have in our head. So I would suggest to try to expect less, or to just not focus so much on the expectations that you have of reality, because the truth is that most of the time they are not going to come true. The expectation that you're going to wake up early and finish things on time sometimes might come true, but sometimes it might not. And expecting things to always be that way is always going to make you feel worse. So plan as much as you can and do your best. Again, do what you can. But remember that in the end, whatever you're doing will be fine as long as you're consistent and you keep moving forward. Don't hold on too much to the past. You can do this. Okay. Now, the third thing is to let go of failures, quote unquote. So, what do I mean by failures? What I mean is that sometimes, for example, you get an exam and you don't perform well, and you're going to take it as a failure, meaning something that failed, that did not achieve its purpose. But in reality, I don't consider that as a failure. I consider that as progress. Why? Well, first and foremost, because the word failure makes us feel bad, but also because when we really think about it, what we are doing is progress. Sure, you didn't get 100% in that exam, but you got 20 or 30%, or maybe 1%. But one or any number is better than zero. And even if you had 0%, you still showed up and you tried, and the exposure to such experiences will eventually build up and turn you into a better student or whatever you want to be. So with that being said, we have the first two tips done, and I think that now we can go to the third, which is my favorite, which is make time for yourself. Now, I have divided this into five different categories that I believe for the average student, it's what we usually focus on one way or another, whether we are aware of it or not. So I'll proceed to describe each one of them briefly and then focusing on what they actually represent to me, for example. So the first category is obviously going to be to learn. And I think that this applies to everyone. Like, give me a second, let me do it again. There we go. So learning is basically educating yourself or acquiring knowledge about any topic. So for example, you could be learning for an exam, or you could be learning for a hobby that you like, but you could also be reading a book or listening to a podcast or talking to a friend about a certain topic, and all those things fall onto learning at the category of educating yourself basically. Then we have work, and work is a word that I would like to explore later on because I have changed my definition of it over the years. But work in this context means working on your career or investing time on your career or careers, depending on what your situation is. So, for example, in my case, I love communicating as a career, and I'm working towards that. I'm building a portfolio through videos like these and the content that I create. So, for me, work sometimes mixes with creativity and education. But for me, putting time into work means achieving things as projects that are published for someone else to see or to enjoy. And for example, in this case, work can be translated into making this video, which might help me to make better videos and potentially work with clients when I'm producing videos. But it could also mean programming for a company, or it could also mean doing an internship. It could also mean doing things at home that might not be producing any income at the moment, but that eventually might help me to get a job, such as things as developing my soft skills, or practicing skills like, again, programming or whatever, that might eventually land me a job. So that is work. Then the third one is to create or creativity. And creativity to me is basically expressing something in whichever art form you choose to do it. So, for example, creativity could be cooking a meal with the intention of making it aesthetically pleasing. That's creativity. Or, for example, when you draw, when you sing, when you do anything where you are expressing yourself in any form. So, I like to take the idea that creativity is a universal term. It's not just related to art itself, although I used art form before. But it's more like the capacity to express something through through an action that you're manifesting. So yeah, you interpret it however you want. That's how I interpret it. So with these three things, we already talked about education, career, and let's call it expression. So these three things are important because we all need to be educated, because the more ignorant we are, the more likely we are to commit mistakes or to just not be the best that we can be. So I really strongly believe that educating ourselves every day is a really important thing in every field that we can. The second thing with the career is important because eventually you will have to get money in this society to reap the benefits of your work and so on. So therefore, if you want to, for example, um, get financial stability or buy a house or buy yourself the latest sports car or invest in a company or help people through NGOs or whatever, all these things require the unit of money. So therefore, if you see it like that, you're putting in time to get something back, which is great. And creativity is just sometimes it's going to work with your career, but sometimes it could just be something that relaxes you or that connects you to a different part of yourself. Those are three topics that we can discuss later, but I'll just keep it there. Then we have the social part, which is basically your social life. And this includes two parts: your social life with yourself and your social life with the rest of the world, which can be subdivided in whichever way you want. So, for example, it can be your family, your close friends, your partner, people that you have met from school or university, and so on. So basically, every single social relationship that you have. And nurturing this is important because sometimes the reason why we don't feel satisfied is not because we're not making progress in life, but because we're not sharing it with other people. And I don't mean sharing as in posting on social media, like, oh, I'm so great because I got a job at this company or whatever, or I have the latest smartphone or whatever, but more as in sharing in a connected way. So, for example, I'm sharing my vulnerability with someone, and that person understands me, and I feel validated or understood by someone. That is a healthy social life. That's what I believe. And last but not least comes personal development. And when I was talking before about socializing with yourself, I mean doing things that only interest you. For example, going out to watch a movie by yourself, or well, you can't go out that much, so you might as well watch it at home. Um, but personal development goes more into you as a person and what do you want to become, or how do you become the best version of yourself. And the reason why I think it's relevant to keep this aside from everything else, but, although it includes educating yourself and working towards something and expressing yourself and also socializing with yourself, it's because sometimes personal development is something that we completely ignore. Like, we educate ourselves, we work hard for society and for ourselves. We express ourselves and we are constantly engaging with the world, but we don't usually take time to ponder if what we're doing is something that we really want, or if there is a better version of ourselves that we can become, or if there are things that we don't really like and we want to change. All these questions that involve your satisfaction with your life and where do you want to go from here, that's what I classify as personal development. They probably overlap in many ways, and that's exactly the point of life. Life is not disconnected from each other. Life is interconnected with each other in all forms. And I think that that's something that I can explore in future videos. But with this, I just wanted to emphasize these 3 points, which are do what you can, let things go, and make time for yourself. And this might help people like me who are doing an online semester in school or university, but this may also help you if you're learning a language or if you are doing any sort of self-education process. With that being said, I hope that this was interesting to listen to. And if you want me to talk or explain any topic, I would gladly do so. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this background was relaxing enough to look while I was talking. And yeah, that's my online semester tips. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.